things I think that research can do is can enable us as service users to share that gaze, research gaze, to start looking at your own individual experience within the context of a lot of other people's experience, and to understand, as you have done, to understand where the psychiatrists are coming from. What is their standpoint? Oh, it's like that. Oh, right, I see. Now I understand. There's a sort of I think, an enormously powerful thing about people having that opportunity to share that gaze and to think, okay, now I can see my own experience next to a lot of other people's, and maybe we can do some research that sees it in a different way. There's another question in there as well that comes up for me around methodology. So in research, we know there are lots of different ways of doing research, and I happen to be a qualitative researcher, so I tend to prefer in-depth interviews with people, and that is a way of hearing people's stories, and it tends, on the whole, it's vast generalisation, but I think on the whole, service users like that approach because they also wish to tell their story and want to hear other people's stories. And so that is, methodology-wise, there's a bit of a debate there, potentially, because, we also know that it's useful sometimes as well to have some quantitative data. Because coming back to that hierarchy, qualitative research is pretty low down as well. Maybe a little bit above expert opinion, possibly, but not very much. Anyway, I'll just try and move on. Some things about good practice, how to do it well, I suppose. And I did bring a copy of the Ethics of Survivor Research, which talks about some of these good practice things with me. It's just I've left it at the hotel. Whoops. But I will certainly be happy to go and get it and give it to somebody if somebody can help me to do that. Basically, the book was written on the basis that of a consultation with a lot of other people, service users and survivors who've been involved in research. And so these are some of the things that people really came up with as being really important in terms of how to do it well, how to involve people in research from a very practical perspective. So things like being involved from the beginning, finding ways of constructive negotiation. If you're doing research that involves clinical academics who are not used to doing this kind of research, alongside service users, then finding a way that you can actually get through some difficulties, because there will be differences of opinion, even just about methodology that I just mentioned. There will be differences of opinion that you may need to sort of negotiate. It's worthwhile thinking about that in advance, because some pieces of work have come a bit of come to disaster over that sort of thing, not actually working out how to get around those sorts of problems, because if a researcher believes that they know the right way of doing it, and the service users think, actually, we'd like to do it a different way, then it's really got to be explained. Why do you think this, and why do you think that? Finding a way through that can be sometimes quite problematic. Some of those others are more, more obvious, and some of them are simply about user involvement in general, not just about user involvement in research at all. Because I think any project that is about to involve service users needs to think about clarity and transparency, saying how much can you influence this piece of work, this project, this service? Because people get very frustrated if they think that they can influence something much more than they actually can, or they're consulted about something, but then their views are not listened to. So being very honest with people, I think, is the very number one. Training, support, payment. Thinking about other incentives than payment, it may be really important to think about other incentives, because if you cannot pay people because of various rules and regulations, thinking about other things you can offer people, particularly in a research environment, access to the internet, information, lots and lots of things that people might really, really want access to, opportunity to come to a seminar like this, perhaps, things like that. I'll speed up a little bit. We've already really touched on some of these dilemmas through the discussion that we've been having. So it's worth just, it is worth just reviewing one or two of those. One of the things I think about research is it can involve very different motives and incentives for researchers and clinical academics than it does for service users, sometimes, although not always. But for some people, particularly in in the academic environment that I know about, in the UK, we have quite a powerful imperative on researchers to get papers published in journals. So they're going to be very career motivated around that sort of thing in order to retain their jobs or retain the research assessment thingy in their university. Clearly I don't work in an academic environment, you can tell. But those sort of motives can sometimes, you know, cut across the other ones that might be coming from service users about wanting to change services, or, you know, really wanting to gain confidence and empowerment skills in that through doing this piece of research. You know, some of these are generalizations, obviously. Power and empowerment, just a question of where, again, the decisions are made, really, about starting of a piece of research, or indeed, you know, then again, once you're actually doing it, who is actually making the decisions and so on. So those things are still retained, can retain in some academic departments. I think the resources element question, though, is also quite a difficult one. Sometimes it's actually changing a little bit now in the UK, where people can get a bit of funding up front prior to writing a proposal. But one of the problems is, if you've written your proposal already, and then you've involved service users at that point, you may already, you know, you may not have people immediately available to get involved. You may not have written it in a way that is going to be best sort of aimed at involving people. So there's an enormous, I mean, some places have done it in, well, different places have done it in different ways. Leeds University, we did a series of seminars on research and research skills to introduce research to a group of local service users and carers. And that worked quite well for a while, I think. I'm not sure right now what's going on with that group. A similar thing was done in South London in the institute, near the Institute of Psychiatry as well, building up a group who would then advise sort of research priorities for that institution. Again, it has to be really sort of thought about, and you have to get some resources to do that sort of thing. And it is an important part of it, because otherwise you're always going to go to the same one or two people who happen to be both service users and researchers, and they will always be the ones who are invited to do the work. And it is important to try and spread that sort of circle a bit wider.